Hello, hello, all you lovely people. Professor Gray here with a new module for you all. Now, I should say we are almost done with unit number 3, so you know what that means. Yep, yeah, I know. It's another time for another unit exam here soon. I know things are flying by so fast, but that's good. That means someday this will be over. But I'm really glad you've made it this far with me, and so I know you can keep doing it. Keep pushing hard. Ooh, what's that? Keep pushing hard, and you can do this. Anyhow, we'll get to that when we get to that. Right now, we continue on with unit number 3. Again, in this unit, we're asking the question: do the interests of others matter? And so far, we've seen two sorts of egoisms and how they respond to this. You know, there was the answer from psychological egoism, which said the interests of others can never matter to us. You know, it's human nature just to care about our own interests and not those of others. And yeah, that's a descriptive claim about human psychology, and we saw some problems with that. But then we have a different answer from ethical egoism, which says the interests of others should not matter. And again, that was a normative claim. Now, that is about ethics. That's normative. And again, we saw the major challenge to ethical egoism comes from this principle of equal treatment. So let's review that. Oh man, I know. It's someday I bet someone in the class is going to have a dream, and the person in their dream is going to turn to them and go, "Hey, yeah, what's the principle of equal treatment again?" And then you're going to wake up. Ah!
Hope this is sweat.
Like, I know, what a nightmare. But again, the principle of equal treatment, what does it say? It says that we should treat people in the same way unless there is a relevant difference between them. Yeah. And as James Rachels and Stuart Rachels argue, from a moral point of view, then we are all equal with one another. And so morality must include some kind of recognition for the needs and interests of other people. And again, that's a pretty powerful insight, I would say, maybe the first kind of powerful insight we have when it comes to normative ethics. Recall again, all these fun definitions we're learning. Normative ethics, what is it? Normative ethics is the idea about stating and defending basic moral principles. And based on what we've seen now in this unit, it seems that our basic moral principles of normative ethics should in some way acknowledge and take into consideration the needs of other people. And again, in the last module, we saw how Peter Singer used this insight to argue that we should, again, you and me, each one of us should be doing more to help those in poverty. After all, our lives, my life, your life, our lives aren't worth more than the lives of those suffering from death and all the other misfortunes of extreme poverty. And so it'd be wrong for us, according to Peter Singer, to spend money on luxuries when we could instead use that money to make a big difference in the lives of those in poverty. And of course, we saw this is a pretty demanding, controversial position for sure. And again, I'll leave it to you what you make of that. But Peter Singer is considered to be, he's still alive, as I mentioned, teaching at was it Princeton or Stanford? Bottom, tell us. But either way, he's still alive, and he considers himself to be a modern day utilitarian. That's the kind of moral or ethical theory he espouses. And the idea behind utilitarianism is some notion that our actions and behavior should promote what we might call the greater good. The greater good. We should be looking out for promoting and helping the greater good. The greater good. According to utilitarianism. And that just means, we care about the well-being or the happiness of other people as much as our own. We care about our happiness, our well-being, but that also of other people as well. And so for his part, what we saw with Peter Singer, he was really just focused on how we can eliminate suffering and pain from other people. But of course, once you're concerned about the suffering and pain that other people are going through, and again, trying to eliminate that or reduce that, then it makes sense to think more positively in the sense of it's not just about preventing something. Maybe we should actually be doing something to promote something to make people happier or to improve or increase their well-being. So on the one hand, eliminate suffering. On the other, promote happiness, promote well-being. in others. And so in this module, we'll be looking at the so-called classical form of utilitarianism, which comes from Jeremy Bentham, an 18th century English philosopher. And I will say, for his time, Bentham was considered to be quite radical. Today, maybe not so radical, but in his time, he was considered to be very radical, very socially progressive, because he argued for women's rights, animal rights, universal education, democracy. He was against slavery, things like that. So, and a lot of the utilitarians of his time they were considered to be these social radicals who thought everyone was equal and should be, what gender and race didn't matter. Everyone should have an access to a universal education, and democracy is the right way to govern ourselves. And so again, Bentham and the other utilitarians of his time really thought that this utilitarianism, this classical utilitarianism, really supported a very aggressive, that's fun, an aggressive progressive agenda, social agenda. And so in any case, classical utilitarianism is a pretty darn complex theory. This is our first real complex ethical theory in the class, and we're going to spend a lot of time looking at the different forms of utilitarianism. So we're starting with classical utilitarianism, and I'll just throw it up there. It does rest on a whole cluster of different claims about morality, and there's a lot going on there. Yeah, you look at that list, there's a lot there. Don't worry, I'll walk you through them all. And I think you really come away with, wow, okay, there's a lot that can go on in a moral theory. Yeah, and so I'll throw that back up again. I want to say I've broken down classical utilitarianism into these parts. In fact, it can be broken down into more parts, but I have mercy. But I've broken down into these parts because there's lots of different ways to be a utilitarian. That is, you might like some of these parts, but you might not like all of them. So for instance, Peter Singer, as I mentioned, he is a utilitarian, but I don't think he would call himself a classical utilitarian, because there's probably items on this list that he might disagree with. And change. So he's not a classical utilitarian, but a different sort of utilitarian. And in a few modules, we'll read the work of John Stuart Mill, another very, very famous utilitarian. And yes, John Stuart Mill calls himself a utilitarian, but he doesn't agree with throw it back up, all these items on this list of classical utilitarianism. We'll see in a few modules, he does change some of these. So he's his own kind of utilitarian, but not the classical kind. So again, what I'm just trying to show here is that classical utilitarianism has different parts, and you might like you might like some of these, but not like others. And so maybe you can come up with an ethical theory of your own where you replace one of these with something you think is better. And we'll see examples of that. But yeah, we'll walk through all that. But again, before we go through all that, I know it's a lot of stuff to cover in this module. Before we do that, though, I have a video here I want you to watch that provides a nice overview of utilitarianism. And again, as always, your favorite substitute teacher, my favorite substitute teacher, Mr. Green. Yes, he's back. However, I will say there were some weird quirks in this lesson of his, in this video. So I did edit it a little bit. So you might notice here and there a little bit of choppiness. They talk about Batman for some reason, and I cut out why they talk about Batman. It's not important. I think, though, you should understand the main points without any issues. Just if you feel like there's a little choppiness here or there, it's because I had to edit it down a bit because he goes on things that we're just not going to talk about. So as always, be good students for Mr. Green, pay attention to the lesson, and after that, I'll see you right back here to flesh out some of these elements of Jeremy Bentham's classical utilitarianism. See you back here for that.